Hello again, everyone. My name is Dale DuFay. Welcome to the Mandela Effect equals everything, knowledge, everything you can imagine. But the reason for this video is about the moon mission that NASA had called Artemis. And it was interesting to find out. I used to study, the Greek gods and Roman gods and those stories when I was a kid, but I don't remember too much of any of them. I just kind of remember the character Loki, the doer of good and the doer of evil. But anyway, this is Artemis, who happens to be the twin sister of Apollo. And that's something I didn't know. And obviously was, predominant with the lunar deities and whatnot. So the point is it was really an appropriate name for this mission for that Apollo did. And it's really, so that's interesting. But the point of this video is no doubt because of that, the fact that it's appropriate and quite obvious to be a perfect name for that current moon mission that NASA put off, that it's no doubt the same name in every reality. And while I talk here, I'm going to kind of go through some pictures I pulled from Wikipedia. I even got the article that you previously saw here from Wikipedia. It's a good source. It's adequate, you know what I mean. But they have really good pictures, and these are some statues. She always seems to be with deer, or with a quiver of arrows and chariots. Even the chariots were driven by deer in a lot of these sculptures, and then also nurturing and things like that. But the point is no doubt NASA had the same name in every single mission. And the point I'm bringing out about the Apollo mission itself is no doubt, obviously, that happened too in every reality. I would imagine that it got postponed twice in every reality because of hurricanes and the weather. And but if it didn't, it was no doubt it's postponed for a reason in other realities. Or it's amazing how the quantum entanglement makes everything, the outcome remain the same. Here's a Roman temple of Artemis, and coins. They even made coins, bronze statues. It's interesting. But the thing I'm getting at with all of this is the time. It's very obviously there's a time difference in this reality compared to the one that I recall. And I've actually calculated it because I used to have that cadence, the 1,000, 2, 1,000 perfected. I practiced it my whole life ever since I was a kid, and would practice it with a stopwatch. And I even had to catch myself slowing down the cadence because I was going too fast. And so I finally got it slowed down, and I couldn't understand why, at that point, why I had to really slow down and take my time. And I had no idea I was connected on a quantum level to other replica versions of myself that have been sharing my soul since the day I was born. And some of these versions of myself that have been sharing my soul since the day I was born are originated in this reality. And no doubt they were practicing the cadence themselves and finding ourselves having to speed it up a little bit. You know what I mean? It's amazing. But at any rate, I got it perfected, and I calculated that the time in these realities is 50% faster. But yet everything still happens. They still got the mission off. It still took relatively the same amount of time to get there to the moon, or whatever mission they were doing. It's no doubt was all at the same time. I imagine the distances vary from reality to reality, from the Earth to the moon, because we know that the moon cycles are different and everything, but yet the cycles are not different. That the moon appears to be cycled different, so everything's exactly the same in every reality. In other words, the moon will always be a new moon or a full moon and all the phases in between. And there will always be the lunar eclipses and solar eclipses in every reality. But the point I'm getting at is, okay, so it's 50% faster here. So, but yet everything's the same. The movie lengths are the same, 90 minutes or 120 minutes, whatever. And they're always the same. So at the time being 50% less here, I mean, what happens? Where does that time compensate? Where does it's got to be, with this quantum entanglement and getting a better understanding of what that's all about, simply because the Mandela effect's revealing it. Somehow it has to be compensated, the time. Where is it compensated? Here they're showing the phases of Artemis phase 1 path to the lunar surface. No doubt this is all identical for the most part. But so where is the time made up? And I kind of came to the conclusion, maybe some of you heard mention of it in other videos that I've done in the past, where we talked about the compensation. Where is it? It has to be made up somewhere, because there's realities where these same individuals in NASA, of course, with their parallel existence, had much more time, 50% more time on the super Earths. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I went to great lengths calculating the time difference with my practice cadence, and I'm sure, no doubt, the soul portion of mine that was in this replica version of myself perhaps is in a reality and a replica version of ourselves on a super Earth, and they too did the calculation, practicing their cadence just as I did, because everything's every reality is virtually identical. At least it is in my case, and they probably came to the conclusion that the time is 50% faster on the super Earths. So it's interesting. Why those realities obviously have more time and these realities don't, but yet the time remains the same. Isn't that crazy when you think about it? These are artist renditions here, and you notice how beautifully pristine the capsule is, and the lunar module and all that, and the rocket itself. This is the artist rendition. So, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, these might be actual pieces that might be there. But here's the thing I'm getting at. I think the time was compensated here with the rocket itself and the capsule. Obviously, all the equipment is virtually identical and appropriate for this reality. But I believe the time was made up on the paint job of the rocket. Now, when I first saw it, there it is on the launch pad. When I first saw it, the first thing that came to my mind is, oh, look at that. They just only got primer paint on it, just primer. The main rocket, the main center of the rocket there. It's just primer. I mean, I'll guarantee in the realities on the super Earths that is painted, because I remember all the Apollo rockets and the Saturn V rockets that launched the Apollo missions. Those were all painted and proudly proclaimed USA on them, and the American flag, and just perfect paint job. Perhaps they did that in these realities. I didn't research that with the Apollo missions. I'm sure they did, but maybe they didn't. I don't know. But I'm sure their corners were cut somewhere, and that's where they make up the time. Think about it, because it takes a great deal of time to paint one of these huge rockets. And that's the first thing I thought of is, wow, look at it. That's where the time was cut on the rockets and painting it. And there's the capsule. It too was not painted. And here it looks like it's, you can see all the equipment and everything, but it's just basically bare metal. So here's another artist's conception of the configuration, and naturally it always looks pristine. And I guarantee it does. Again, I will, there's no way of proving it, of course, but I'll guarantee that rocket was painted, that Artemis rocket. These are some cool conception, artist conception of, the future missions. They actually plan on doing a base. But there it is. I mean, it's all bare metal and rusty and everything. I remember honestly remember the capsules on the Apollo missions were just all painted white. And, here's a flight path. Again, no doubt, very similar in every reality. Of course, there's mathematical adjustments to for whatever reality is going to be differences and variations, of course. Because I know, the Earth itself is larger in those realities. So of course the moon must be, or the distance must vary, so it can have its lunar eclipses and solar eclipses. So there's no doubt variations there, but the path is the same. Here again we see the rocket, just in bare primer. That really amazed me, and it's just funny to think about things like that. And no doubt, of course, the other replica versions of myself been sharing my soul in it since the day I was born, and experiencing this Mandela effect. Is this portion of my soul has been the soul portion that I'll have for the rest of my life. That's the only thing that's shifting through these realities is our soul. This is a very spiritual event. But I'm sure that portion of my soul that was in this replica version of myself, that's perhaps in a version of myself that I recall, and that reality is saying the same thing. Wow, look at how beautiful they painted a rocket. That's because they had more time, 50% more time. And he probably thinking, wow, they never would have had the time to do that in the reality I recall, where I'm saying I'll guarantee that in that reality it's painted white, or perhaps checkerboard, black and white. But here it is taken off. I'm sure the rocket was just as powerful in every reality and was successful on the third attempt in every reality. They had to scrap it twice, and one time they actually had to put it back into the launch building. And that's a great deal of effort involved with that. But the mission did succeed. There might have been differences in delay or whatever in the other realities, but the fact is it was a successful launch. And I'm pretty certain that they would have been the hurricanes and the weather that scrapped the first two attempts in all the realities, because one thing's for sure is the weather is the same in every reality as far as hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that, because I can remember those historic weather events in the reality I recall, and they're virtually identical, same dates and everything here. That amazes me. So even the weather is parallel. Think about that. It's amazing. And here's the logo, which is pretty cool. And it's interesting that they show the rocket, the main part of it, as being white, or not white, but of course the primer brown. And here's this, no doubt, all this is very similar in every reality. You could see the rocket booster, main rocket actually falling. Obviously, they may, whether they recycle those or not, I'm sure they do, because they splash down. And in this case, it looks like, what is it? Main Pacific splashdown and Atlantic splashdown. That's interesting. The two boosters splashed down in the Atlantic, and the main one splashed down in the Pacific. That would make sense because of the distance involved. But the thing is that that's what's interesting about this reality. These realities on the Orion Dwarf Earths is things are more reasonable. If you know what I'm saying? Not as flamboyant. And but now we know why, because they don't have time to be. If that booster rocket's just going to splash down in the Pacific, that main one, then why paint it? You know what I mean? But See, here's an artist rendition of one. See how it's painted? That's how I recall it, like that. Or this might even be a actual shot of a test launch of their specific rocket they were using. But see here how they painted it real nice. That's how I guarantee the rocket. I'll say it 100 times. I'll guarantee that it's painted white in the realities on the Sagittarius super Earths. And see, here it is again. It's not the color they chose. That's the color of the primer they used on the metal, which is no doubt anti-corrosive and whatnot. But that probably could have, been a good undercoating for a paint job, a white paint job with USA on it. That's how I recall it. But it's interesting. That's the first thing I thought immediately when I saw that is, wow, it's not painted. That's because they don't have the time to do it here. Of course, they'll say it's economical and whatnot, but it wouldn't have been a problem if they had more time, 50% more time. Of course, they're totally oblivious to the fact that they have replica versions of themselves working on the same mission and operations and everything in other realities, let alone other realities where the time is 50% faster. And that rocket's painted white with USA on it. Big USA with the U on the top, the S in the middle, and the A on the bottom. And it looked really nice on the Apollo's rockets when they were launching. They had close-ups of the rocket, and you could see the USA come, almost like it was being spelled out as it was launching up. It was very magnificent. And they did the same with this one. I guarantee it, on those Sagittarius super Earths. There's some beautiful shots of the moon. It amazes me how the moon is, I did a lot of studying on the moon and research, and in fact, it was when I was researching and studying the moon on YouTube that I discovered the Mandela effect, because YouTube kept suggesting I watch Mandela effect videos, and I had no interest whatsoever. What's the Mandela effect? I didn't care, and I knew it had something to do with memory, so I wasn't really interested. But I was studying the moon, and then finally they popped up a Mandela effect about I can't think of her name right now. It just escapes me. But I decided to watch that one, and then I was like, wow, she didn't say that at the Academy Awards. I remember specifically what she said. Here's a splashdown, another close-up of the rocket, and you can see how it's, it's primer on there. It just looks rough, you know what I mean? I know they tried to make it as neat as possible. Sally Fields was her name. But that's what got my attention, when I was studying the moon and YouTube, and that got my attention to that particular one about Sally Fields and when she won the Oscar. And because I remember it vividly, because I always really liked her. And so I was like, wow, she didn't, that's what I was like, started looking into it, and then realized that I was affected too. Started looking at the differences and variations all around, including the Earth itself. That was a really big one. Here it is. See the capsules, just bare metal practically. I'm sure they have some kind of coating on it. But these are awesome moon shots. The moon in every reality is quite remarkable. I have a lot of opinions about the moon. I think at one time the moon wasn't here, and which would have made the axis of the Earth vertical, which would have made which would explain why the poles had massive ice caps. Speaking of which, I remember the Sagittarius super Earth, where this portion of my soul originated from, that the North Pole still had a massive ice cap. It's sitting on top of a huge continent called Antarctica. Now, and South Pole also had a huge ice pack sitting on top of Antarctica. In fact, they just recently, because of technology and ice penetrating equipment, that they were able to finally know what the outline of Antarctica was, and the That's amazing. It's real similar to what it is here, where it is real obvious. And I remember just before my soul, this portion of my soul departed that reality. I remember they were so excited they just found out that there was a mountain range in Antarctica. It was like a really big news. So that was really, it's just amazing to be able to see it so clearly in these realities. But here's the capsule after splashdown, and you can, it just amazes me that it's not painted. It's just unbelievable. But now, I'm amazed by it, but also amazed by the understanding of why that is. There's just 50% less time in these realities, and it has to be made up somewhere. So, I kind of digressed a little, but this video is really about the time, the fact that there's 50% less time, and understanding that it has to be made up somewhere. And it seems to be in movies, for example, it seems to be in the backdrops of all the movies, the props and the quality of them and whatnot. It just amazes me, because I remember the movies were so well done and unbelievable. It wasn't just because, being younger and full of glitter and things but that's how it is in those realities, obviously. Very flamboyant. That's why Isaiah wrote the lion and the lamb, and because it's more flamboyant there. And here it's the wolf and the lamb, which is more applicable. Just like it's more applicable that they wouldn't spend time painting something that's going to go through hell, essentially. But in the realities where they have more time, this capsule is painted, believe me. It's white, with USA all over it, flag on it, and on probably both sides, but all with a pristine white paint job. And the balloons would have looked better too. These balloons kind of look, I don't know, they're just, looks like they cut corners on that too. So anyway, that's what this video is about. It seems interesting where it's compensated. The time has to be compensated somewhere, because even though there's 50% time difference, the time always remains the same. Think about it. And the understanding of why the time is less here is because of the Earth. Think about it. If every Earth and every reality in the Milky Way galaxy, which there's no doubt millions, it is rotating off, the speed of the rotation off their axis is exactly the same. And it's easy to say that with confidence, simply because scientists and astrophysicists realize that the rotation of the galaxy is exactly the same, no matter where you are in the galaxy, whether you're right near the galactic center or out on the outer tip, the speed is identical. And it's very perplexing that it actually defies Kepler's laws of dynamics. And so, but yet it's understood that that's the way the galaxy is. And with that in mind, well, certainly it would make sense that the rotation of any planet off its axis is identically the same in every reality. The speed, that is, the speed of the rotation is exactly the same. So naturally, if you're going to calibrate a 24-hour clock on an Earth, you're going to say, well, one full rotation of the Earth is 24 hours. So if the Earth is smaller, then naturally the time is going to be faster. So that explains that. I mean, what other explanation is there? I mean, if I can figure it out, what I'm getting at is that the answers are there right in our front of our face, because there's no denying that the time is different. Everybody says that. It's much faster here, but it's always been this speed here, because it was calibrated who knows how long ago, off of a 24-hour clock. Every reality is going to have 24 hours. Just because the Earth is bigger doesn't mean there's more hours, because in the big, large super Earths, they calculated on one full revolution as well. And the fact that they're some upwards of 4 to 5 times larger than this Earth, this Orion Dwarf Earth in this reality. You know, they're going to, the rotation, the speed is exactly the same. So, but they're larger, so it's going to take longer for it to go one full revolution. Think about that. But yet the time remains the same. That's crazy. But even though it's faster, but it has to be compensated somewhere. And NASA compensated it here on the Artemis by not painting the main booster rocket and the capsule. So I hope that makes sense to you. And it's pretty much all I got to say. Well, I got a lot to say about it. I can go on for hours, but I try to keep these videos limited. So with that, I thank you for watching, and we'll talk at you later. Love you.